So, our key findings are that wine grading and pricing is a lot more subjective than what consumers may believe. Our analysis shows that consumers should not choose wines based solely on price or expert score alone. And although these signals are often treated as indicators of quality, both price and ratings are influenced by subjective and contextual factors rather than just purely objective measures of taste. Uh, Regional reputation plays a very important role in wine evaluation. Certain countries and regions produce very highly rated wines, and the regions most frequently reviewed in the data set are not always those with the highest average scores. This indicates that consumer exposure, regional prestige, and market availability influence which wines become widely recognized, and flavor, language, and reviews is strongly associated with scoring pattern. Wines described with darker fruit and spice characteristics get higher average scores than wines using more broad or generic terms. And lastly, reviewer behavior affects scoring. Even after controlling for the average score of the same wine, some tasters systematically rate wines higher or lower than the baseline, indicating measurable reviewer bias. And altogether, these findings suggest that wine scores and prices reflect a combination of regional preferences, flavors, and reviewer subjectivity, and it's a lot more subjective than what consumers may initially think.
So, hi, we're Team 5, and we're here to demystify wine. My name is Brian,
And I'm Yuri.
and we chose to analyze wine because the wine market presents a useful data science problem, mainly prices and ratings. Prices and ratings will often feel unintuitive and not very clear to even the most experienced consumers. And yet, many of these consumers will find these signals difficult to interpret. For example, consumers would frequently rely on simplified indicators such as price and score when selecting a wine, even though these indicators are not necessarily reflective of the objective value of these wines. So our analysis focuses on three main questions. First, we will examine whether certain flavor descriptors are consistently associated with higher or lower wine scores. Then we'll explore how wine scores vary across countries and regions, understand how geographical reputation will relate to the perceived quality. And lastly, we will analyze whether individual wine tasters exhibit symmetric differences between scoring behavior, which could inherently introduce bias into the ratings. So altogether, we hopefully will see that wine scores and prices will be clearer to these consumers. I'll hand over to Yuri.
Yeah, so the data set was taken from the Wine Enthusiast magazine data set off of Kaggle. This data set had over 130,000 rows of wine reviews, and each of those rows contained 14 columns that contain factors such as country that the wine's from, description that the reviewer gives of the wine, uh, a score for the quality of the wine, and so forth. We took that data and we cleaned it up, removing no values and combining region one and region two into a single main region, reducing no rows. And we removed designation along with other columns that we ended up not using, such as winery. And we put the data into tidy form. So, for question one, what are the key wine flavors? What is the effect of association on their scores? So, to examine flavor profiles that are associated with higher wine qualities, we analyzed the flavor descriptors that were in the wine description column. We used regex to identify the most frequently occurring flavor keywords in the data set. We found the top 12 keywords because two of those top 12 keywords were wine varieties and not flavor descriptors. So we dropped those, and then we ended up with the top 10 most common flavor tags. So among those tags, the least frequent was ready to drink with 71 occurrences, and the most frequent was black cherry with 7,078 occurrences. So for each flavor tag, we calculated the average wine score, wine quality score, and price, and we map them out on this graph. The size of each dot shows the sample size we're pulling from, how many wines display that, and its position shows its relationship between price and average score. And the results show that wines described with darker fruits, regardless of where they are in the world, what country, what winery they're from, um, have a higher average score than wines that have descriptions that are more broader and use general terms such as simply fruit flavor or use terms such as red fruit or medium bodied. Those receive lower scores and dark fruits receive higher scores.
Yeah, so our second question is what regions produce the highest scoring values? Because we want to compare these flavor profiles and these scores. So the results would show that the highest scoring wines often come from very specific wine regions rather than broad geographic areas. So we have areas in Italy, areas in France. And in many of these regions, as you can see in the left-hand graph, are associated with high quality wine production particularly within the Burgundy region of France, which suggests that historically prestigious vineyard areas will continue to perform strongly when it comes to the scoring, which inherently leads to a question of, is there an instances of biased reviews that affect these overall scores for these regions? So our question three will examine this. Does the wine have an effect on the overall score given by the wine or region? Because wine scores may vary depending on the reviewer, so we had to adjust these scores to account for the bias. And this is done by calculating each of the reviewers' average scores and comparing it to the global average across the data set. The difference between these values are treated as reviewers' bias, and then we were able to create an adjusted score by subtracting the reviewer's bias from each individual rating, which is seen on the graph on the right. This adjustment helps us ensure that the difference between the regions are not simply the result of certain reviewers consistently saying, hey, this is a better one or this is a lower one. And once these adjusted scores are calculated, we were able to expand the data set to see that each wine was associated with a slightly different score. This suggests that wine scores are really not perfectly objective, and after controlling for the average score, some of these tasters will score consistently above or below the wine baseline. To make sure that all of our data sets were accurate and clean, we made sure that each of the wines and reviewers had at least two reviews to see where the average lies. So what does this mean? What does the future say for us? Well, for consumers, this means that price really is not treated as a perfect indicator of quality. And for retailers, this suggests that the stocking and marketing of wines around popular regional identities and recognizable flavor profiles may be more useful than just relying on price alone. And for future research, we would like to see that an expansion on the flavor profiles, specifically towards aromas and notes within wines. Thank you.